Here's your voiceover-ready script. There's a silence that speaks louder than any answer. And for weeks, that silence had a name. Caitlin Clark, the most famous face in women's basketball. A woman who could sell out arenas with a single tweet, who had cameras trained on her every move, every word, every gesture. And yet, when the biggest controversy in her sport exploded around her, she said nothing at all. It started with her own teammate. Sophie Cunningham, a name most casual fans barely knew before this season, suddenly found herself at the center of a national firestorm. In an interview, she said something simple, something she believed was just common sense. That young girls shouldn't have to compete against biological men. That female athletes deserve protection, in competition, in locker rooms, in every corner of the sport they loved. It should have been one soundbite, one opinion, lost in the churn of 1,000 daily headlines. Instead, it lit a fuse that traveled across the entire country. Protesters started showing up outside arenas. Not one city. 3. Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis. Supporters on one side, critics on the other, standing outside the very buildings where the Indiana Fever were about to play. Inside those buildings, the tension didn't fade, it intensified. Cunningham was booed. Loudly, repeatedly. Opposing players and coaches began making their own statements, wearing shirts, sending messages without saying a single word out loud. And through all of it, Caitlin Clark disappeared. Not from basketball. She was still lacing up, still competing, still putting up the kind of performances that made her the most electric player in the league. But from the microphones, from the questions, from the moment where she would have to stand in front of a camera and say something, anything, about the storm swirling around her own locker room. The Fever seemed determined to protect that silence. After one road game, Clark simply wasn't sent to the podium. The team sent other players instead. Then it happened again. Win after win, and still, no Clark. It looked less like an accident and more like a decision. A calculated one. Then came the moment that revealed just how carefully this was being managed. A reporter tried to ask Clark's own teammates about the Cunningham controversy, about what was happening around the team. Before the question could even finish, a team representative cut in. The press conference ended. Right there. No hesitation. No apology. It wasn't just Clark avoiding the story anymore. It looked like an entire organization building a wall around it. And that's when the real question started to take shape. Not whether Clark had an opinion. Everyone has an opinion. The real question was what would happen the moment she was finally forced to share it. That moment arrived on a Sunday night, after a tough road loss to the Minnesota Lynx. The same night the Lynx's head coach had walked onto the sideline wearing a shirt with a message that left no room for interpretation. The room was thick with everything that had built up over the previous 2 weeks. And this time, Clark walked to the podium herself. Reporters leaned in. Cameras rolled. Finally, someone was going to get an answer. Clark spoke. Carefully. Deliberately. She said the controversy wasn't something the team discussed in their own locker room. She said it wasn't her place, or anyone on the team's place, to solve. She said that was a job for leagues, for governing bodies, for people far removed from a court and a scoreboard. Then she pivoted, almost instantly, back to basketball, back to the loss, back to the safest possible ground she could stand on. When a reporter pushed for something more, something real, Clark simply said she'd already answered. But had she? She never said whether she agreed with her own teammate. She never said whether she agreed with the coach standing across from her in that trans kids belong shirt. She built an answer so careful, so measured, that it revealed almost nothing about what she actually believed. And here's the part that makes this so fascinating. That silence wasn't an accident. It was strategy. Because Caitlin Clark isn't just an athlete anymore. She's a brand. She sells sneakers. She headlines commercials. Her fan base stretches far beyond the traditional edges of women's basketball into households that had never watched a WNBA game before she arrived. If she had sided with her teammate, she risked being painted as exclusionary, drawing outrage from activists and from voices already inside her own league who hadn't exactly embraced her. If she had sided with the coach in that shirt, she risked alienating a massive portion of her audience, one that polling suggests leans heavily toward believing female sports categories should remain exactly that. There was no version of a real answer that didn't cost her something. So she chose the version that cost her the least, or so it seemed. Because here's the twist nobody saw coming. Her silence didn't satisfy anyone either. Supporters of her teammate felt abandoned, wondering why the biggest star in the sport wouldn't stand behind the very person she shared a locker room with. Advocates on the other side felt exactly the same disappointment, insisting that someone with her platform had a responsibility to use it one way or another. Both sides wanted a hero. Both sides got the same 3 sentences about basketball. And that's the real story here. Not the specific words Caitlin Clark chose at that podium, but the impossible position she found herself standing in. A league that has spent years encouraging its players and coaches to speak out, to take stances, to make their platforms about more than just the game. And then, when the biggest star of them all decided to step back instead of forward, the silence became its own kind of headline. Clark walked away from that podium having said something and nothing at the same time. A perfectly polished answer built to survive the moment. But moments like this don't stay quiet for long. And the next time a microphone finds her, the same question will be waiting. The only thing that remains uncertain is whether she'll be able to hand back the same careful non-answer twice.